Being here at Kia Maia for Mana's State of the Nation address recalls a relationship forged 75 years ago between Ratana and Labour, when Tau Pōtiki Wiremu Ratana and Michael Joseph Savage charted a path to give succour to Te Pani me te Rawakore, the poor and the dispossessed. Back then, New Zealand was coming out of the Great Depression. Times were tough. Māori and the poor had suffered hugely, and the state responded with job creation schemes, state housing programs, a quality education system, and solid healthcare programs built by Savage and endorsed by Ratana. And underpinning everything was a call to honour the Treaty of Waitangi to bring equality between Māori and Pākehā. The Ratana Labour Alliance continued right up until the 1980s, when Labour launched an asset sales program, which led to massive unemployment, gave tax breaks to the rich, and increased taxation on the poor with the introduction of GST. Labour's economic policy of the time was called Rogernomics. Its leader was Roger Douglas, and one of its greatest cheerleaders was Phil Goff. Ever since then, Māori have struggled. The Ratana Labour Alliance has fallen away, and today Labour holds only 2 of the 7 Māori seats. National's philosophy of helping the rich get richer at the expense of the poor and of using blatant racism to promote its legislative agenda has had an even greater impact on our society. Rob Muldoon was notorious for a racist agenda which gave birth to land occupations at Bastion Point and Raglan, from where Mana drew 2 of its candidates, Kireama Pene and Angeline Greensell. And the Springbok Tour protest led by Mana's John Minto. Muldoon was followed by Jim Bolger, under whom the nation was burdened with the mother of all budgets, a vicious attack on the foundations of the welfare state that led to the privatisation of our health system, the commercialisation of our housing sector, and the reneging on promises in superannuation and education. Bolger's term saw Mana's Waitakere candidate Sue Bradford arrested on numerous occasions for fighting for the rights of beneficiaries, and Mana's Waiariki candidate Annette Sykes accused of sedition for daring to challenge the state. And that's why I'm proud to be part of Mana's leadership team, because I stand alongside people who are heroes in the struggle for Māori rights, for human rights, and for the rights of Pacifica, of workers, of beneficiaries and the poor.
Sure.
I share this stage with people who have stood against both National and Labour governments' attacks on the marginalised and the defenceless. And if ever the country needed a movement to redress the devastation caused by the last 25 years of free market economics under both Labour and the current right-wing government of National Act and the Māori Party, then now is the time and Mana is the team. Our country is crying out for a new direction, a direction away from the broken belief that the market will provide and that capitalism will lift us from the quagmire of destitution. And the facts are simple. 25 years of prancing down the capitalist road have given us staggering levels of unemployment, third world diseases in communities of the poor right here in Aotearoa, huge increases in the price of food, electricity and petrol, an ever more costly health system, and an education system designed to keep the poor from ever achieving success. One option, of course, for many Māori, Pacifica and the poor has been to skip the ditch to Australia. 100,000 Kiwis have given up on New Zealand and gone to Oz in the last 3 years alone in search of a decent day's wage for a decent day's work. And nothing quite reflects this trend like the story of Norman Kirk and that young Māori boy walking hand in hand at Waitangi in 1973, an image that remains embedded in the minds of those old enough to remember. And then seeing John Key trying to recapture that aura by strolling through Waitangi with Aroha Island in 2008 after first meeting her at an election photo opportunity in McGeehan Close, a poor neighbourhood in Mount Albert. Because Aroha's story is a typical one. Not long after the photo shoot, she was kicked out of school, She spent time in SIF's care, and now she's left the country because New Zealand offered her nothing and because more opportunities existed for her in Australia. A scenario too many of our whānau have become accustomed to. And the root cause of this exodus is the failure, the absolute failure of successive governments to deal with the issue of poverty and the growing gap between the rich and the poor.
Sure.
Particularly ironic, given that the English came here to escape the pain of poverty in England and sent their convicts to Australia. Now we're running away to Australia, and those who stay here are increasingly more likely to wind up in the new jails being built every year to house the poor and the dispossessed. And that's the primary issue that defines the state of our nation today, poverty, which is at record levels right now. At exactly the same time that the rich, these guys here, the stinking rich, the filthy rich, are experiencing record levels of wealth. When the top 1% has more wealth than the bottom 50%. Where the gap between these guys and you guys is worse than in most developed countries, where poverty has become the norm for much of the country, and where we have 270,000 children going hungry every day, suffering from bad health and picking up diseases that we thought only existed in the third world. So let's just take a moment to think about that statistic. 270,000 kids living in poverty right here in Aotearoa. I mean, seriously, how many of you thought you would ever hear those words being spoken about how New Zealand treats its own children? What's gone wrong with this country's consciousness, with our sense of right and wrong, with the moral obligation that says we will ensure that future generations are provided with better opportunities than we had? I know that many people tuned into TV3's documentary Inside Child Poverty last night, and I congratulate the producers of the show for forcing us to confront our ugly reality. I thank the Child Poverty Action Group for their efforts in bringing this reality into our living rooms. I feel for that young boy who has to go to hospital every few months for an illness that could have been prevented by simply eradicating poverty. I struggle to accept that in this land of milk and honey, 1 in every 5 kids lives in poverty. And I find it hard to believe that in a land with such wealth, New Zealand has the 3rd worst child health statistics in the OECD after Mexico and Turkey. But the truth is that successive governments since the mid-80s have driven us down the path of selfishness, where those in power have been preoccupied with chasing the dollar and ignoring the pain. And this election campaign itself has been highlighted by a refusal to accept the reality of child poverty in our own land, promises of an economic turnaround that nobody believes, and a media show about a meaningless cup of tea in Epsom, when our focus and our attention should be on our country's inability to deal with the fact that 270,000 of our children are going without proper food every single day. Mana doesn't have all of the answers, not by a long shot, but we are committed to putting forward policies that help the poor, putting an end to policies that enrich the wealthy, and if necessary, and know this, Mana, if necessary, mobilising the people to fight for an end to poverty in Aotearoa.
Yeah.
We need to stop tinkering around the edges, and we need wholesale and radical change, or we will continue to lose generations of talented New Zealanders to Australia and beyond. We need to look to progressive countries like Sweden for models. We need to work with the Child Poverty Action Group to create solutions, and we need to look to our own history for answers to our problems, because the user pays model has failed us miserably, and those who have suffered most have been the children of the poor.